The 1930s were a time of change, hope, and tension around the world. But beneath the surface, the seeds of the largest and deadliest conflict in human history were being sown. This is the story of World War II, a war that reshaped our world forever. After World War I, many countries were left devastated. People were desperate for stability, and in some places, that desperation led to the rise of powerful dictators. In Germany, a man named Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, promising to restore Germany's lost glory. He led the Nazi Party and quickly turned Germany into a dictatorship. In Italy, Benito Mussolini had risen to power in the 1920s with dreams of rebuilding the Roman Empire. And in Japan, military leaders, backed by Emperor Hirohito, sought to expand their influence across Asia. Each of these nations had their own ambitions, and their hunger for power set the stage for a global conflict. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. This was the event that finally ignited the war. Germany's attack was swift and brutal, using a new kind of warfare called blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Blitzkrieg relied on speed, tanks, and airplanes to overwhelm the enemy. Just 2 days later, on September 3rd, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. But Poland didn't stand a chance. Within weeks, it was divided between Germany and the Soviet Union, which had secretly agreed to take part of Poland under a non-aggression pact with Germany. By 1940, Hitler wasn't stopping. His next targets were Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and then, in a shocking turn of events, France. Using the same blitzkrieg tactics, German forces swept through Europe in just a matter of months. France, which had been a major world power, was defeated and occupied by June 1940. Britain now stood alone in Europe, facing the Nazi war machine. Hitler had a plan to invade Britain, but first, he needed to control the skies. This led to the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940, a fierce air war between the Royal Air Force, RAF, and the German Luftwaffe. For months, the skies above Britain were filled with dogfights and bombing raids. But despite being outnumbered, the RAF defended their homeland, forcing Hitler to abandon his invasion plans. Prime Minister Winston Churchill praised the RAF pilots, saying, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." In June 1941, Hitler made a daring and ultimately disastrous decision. He broke his non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union and launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history. Germany attacked the Soviet Union with millions of soldiers, hoping for a quick victory. At first, the Germans made rapid progress, but the Soviet resistance was fierce. The war on the Eastern Front would become one of the bloodiest and most brutal campaigns in all of World War II. Meanwhile, across the Pacific Ocean, Japan was expanding its empire. It had already taken over parts of China and Southeast Asia. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The attack crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet and killed over 2,400 people. The very next day, the United States declared war on Japan, and soon after, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. The war had now truly become a global conflict, with fighting in Europe, Asia, and the Pacific. For a while, the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, seemed unstoppable. But But by 1942, the tide began to turn. In the Pacific, the U.S. won a decisive victory at the Battle of Midway, sinking 4 Japanese aircraft carriers and turning the tide of the war in the Pacific. In Europe, the brutal Battle of Stalingrad became a turning point on the Eastern Front. The Soviet Union, after months of fierce fighting, surrounded and defeated the German army. It was a devastating blow to Hitler's ambitions in the East. And in North Africa, British forces under General Bernard Montgomery defeated the German Afrika Korps at the Battle of El Alamein. This victory marked the beginning of the end for the Axis in Africa. By 1944, the Allies were ready to take the fight directly to Hitler's fortress in Europe. On June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, Allied forces, including American, British, and Canadian troops, landed on the beaches of Normandy in France. This was the largest amphibious invasion in history. Despite heavy casualties, the Allies secured the beaches and began their march across France, pushing the Germans back. Paris was liberated in August 1944, and soon the Allies were advancing into Germany itself. As the Allies advanced from the west, the Soviet Union pushed in from the east. By April 1945, the war was coming to a close. Adolf Hitler, realizing that defeat was inevitable, retreated to his bunker in Berlin. On April 30, 1945, Hitler took his own life. Just a few days later, on May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered. This day became known as Victory in Europe Day. Even though the war in Europe was over, the fighting in the Pacific continued. The United States had slowly been pushing Japan back, but Japan refused to surrender. The war in the Pacific was brutal, with fierce battles like Iwo Jima and Okinawa costing thousands of lives. In August 1945, the U.S. made a fateful decision. On August 6th, an American plane dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, killing tens of thousands. 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Faced with this unimaginable destruction, Japan finally surrendered on August 15, 1945. World War II was over, but the world would never be the same. An estimated 70 to 85 million people died in the conflict, soldiers and civilians alike. Europe and much of Asia were in ruins, and millions of people were displaced. The United Nations was formed in 1945 with the hope that such a devastating war would never happen again. But new tensions quickly arose, leading to the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. World War II shaped the modern world in ways we still feel today, from the rise of the United States and Soviet Union as superpowers to the spread of new technologies and the movement for human rights. But beyond the numbers and battles, World War II is also a story of human resilience. It's about ordinary people who lived through extraordinary times. Soldiers, nurses, factory workers, children hiding in shelters, families torn apart by war, and nations coming together to rebuild. As we remember the great conflicts of the past, we must also honor the memory of those who lived through them and the lessons their experiences teach us. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the story of World War II. From the rise of dictators to the battles that shaped our world, the legacy of this war still echoes today. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more engaging history content.